crazy COVID time.
Yeah.
You know,
Oh yeah.
I think everybody's still adjusting back from that.
I think so, and I don't know that things will ever go back to anything like to being what it was before. I feel like it's kind of left its permanent imprint of a new era.
That is my fear, is that this is just what it's going to be now.
Yeah.
That people are going to be at this heightened state. The fear, the reverberations are just going to stick around, and we're never going to get back to anything pre-COVID.
Yeah, I mean that's partly my hit. Definitely, there's a lot of fear in people of just like, I mean, viruses in general now, and bacteria is like the micro world all of a sudden.
Everybody's on edge.
But I feel like it also, at least in my experience, it's I see a lot of people that now have lost a lot of trust in like kind of some of our larger groups of government that we've been so accustomed to listening to kind of blindly, and I see a lot more questioning, which I think is not a bad thing at the same time. So I've seen people go both ways, either super duper fear or it could be empowering if you let it, right?
Does that questioning extend to you in your practice, or do you feel like that's more general medicine?
I would say not in my personal practice, in the medicine that I practice, but I feel like more of that distrust of Western medicine. I mean, I feel like around here we already had that because our medical field out here is kind of lacking in hospital setting, nurses,
a lot of ways,
staffing, specialty doctors, all of it's lacking. So yeah, I feel like people are definitely looking for more of an alternative at this point and trying anything else before some of the Western solutions as far as surgery and medications. And yeah, that's just what I hear all the time. Maybe that's just the people who seek me out because they're already looking for something different. But
Humboldt's unique in that perspective, in that I think everybody is more open to ideas up here.
Yeah.
There's not this hard line of, no, you have to go this one route. People around here kind of are pro figuring it out on their own and trying different things and testing different perspectives.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, we definitely live in an area where it's a very diverse politically, and I think that leads to a lot of one type of people and a lot of different type of people, and so we kind of get the full spectrum of just views and opinions and all that. So for better or worse, right?
So is it a good time, would you say, to be someone who is practicing medicine outside of a traditional Western view? Because you can kind of fill that niche for people and maybe reach those who otherwise wouldn't have come your way?
I would say yes. I mean, not that, I don't know, that was definitely one of the reasons why I got into it, was because I wanted to be something different. I wanted to offer a niche that people would seek out, something that could both complement Western medicine, but also be much more on the preventative aspect of preventing people needing surgery or preventing people. Like, I feel like at least traditional Chinese medicine, it has a very unique way of seeing small problems before they become big problems. And I think that tends to be an area where Western medicine lacks, because like, just take lab testing, for example, they have such broad ranges, and you can be on like the lower end of, whatever they're testing and still be within what they call normal ranges, but they wouldn't know. They would just be like, oh, you're a little bit on the low side, but do whatever, you'll be fine. It's like there's not a lot of preventative care. There's not a lot of education surrounding diet choices and exercise choices and lifestyle choices and stuff like that. So I think that's where Chinese medicine excels, and other forms of medicine like naturopathy and Ayurveda and stuff like that. Like, those all see smaller problems before they become big things.
That falling into the average is what scares me, because I've heard stories of people going to, their primary care physician, and maybe they're 40% body fat, 50% body fat, and the primary care says, oh, you're fine. You're within the average. Yep. And you hear that and you're like, that's might be the average. That's not a good average. Right. That's not where we want to be.
Right. And most averages are based on men. So women especially get left out of that. Like, what's normal for women? Well, they're basing all the averages on men because they're the larger people that are involved in studies. So, that's just a whole
problematic
thing. Yeah.
I've heard that's huge, especially in the mental health field, because all of the medications and everything and how we diagnose them were tailored toward men
Yeah.
initially. And so now we're trying to figure out, okay, well, maybe this isn't the right approach for women because their bodies work differently. The systems are different, and maybe we can fine tune it to make it a little better for them.
Yes, very true. Yeah. Nope, I would agree 100%.
So how did you get into traditional Chinese medicine? So your background is you have a doctorate in that, or what?
I do. Yep. I have a doctorate in traditional Chinese medicine. I am also a licensed acupuncturist in the state of California. So essentially, that's a very long story, and I could start like from the beginning, or I could start just from my schooling. But I was raised here in Humboldt County. So my name's Raegan Lima. So I am a Lima, and my parents have owned Lima's Pharmacy for the last 25, 30 years. So I always grew up in a healthcare setting. I think that from a very early age, I was inclined to health in that way and to taking care of myself, but also helping people. And I initially, when I started going to school, I wanted to go into Western medicine. I mean, yeah, I wanted to be a nurse, or I wanted to be an MD or a specialist of some sort. And through my schooling, I kind of had like a quarter life crisis where I was like, I was changing a lot. I moved away. I lived on my own for a little while. I kind of started becoming my own person, away from where I was born and raised and away from my family. And I realized like, this is not what I want to do. This isn't how I want to contribute to the world. It's already out there. It's already available. People are already doing this. I don't need to contribute to something that people are already doing. I want to do something that people aren't doing and that people need. That's a niche that's different, but still in the way of health. So it took me a while to figure out exactly what that is. And I changed my major a few times. And I was living down in Santa Cruz doing my undergrad at this time. And I discovered that there was first that you could even go to school for acupuncture. Like just that in itself, I was like, what? That's a thing? People do that? And this was back in like 2014, 2015. So, and then I found out that there was a school in Santa Cruz, a private school specifically for traditional Chinese medicine and acupuncture. And it was just like, I went to an open house and it was like light bulbs. It was like, this is what I want to do with my life. It's different. It's effective. It's been around for thousands and thousands and thousands of years. It's something that intrigues me. And it, still to this day, I'm like constantly learning new things. I think that's one of my favorite things about it is that I will never stop learning. I will never stop growing. I will always be exposed to new people who have different problems, a different set of problems. And whether it challenges me or whether I've seen it before, like I know what to do to make it work and to help them. So,
had you had any experience with acupuncture or TCM outside of having that realization that this is what you wanted to do and finding that private school? Was this like a path that you had?
I hadn't. No,
nothing.
No, I literally, I was trying to figure out what to do, and I had looked into naturopathy and some other alternative medical modalities, and I think I saw a commercial for acupuncture when I was on this cruise ship, and was like, whoa, acupuncture! Like I didn't realize people did that still. Of course I've heard about it, but it's always portrayed as like
I don't like this far out thing.
Totally.
It's not real. It's pseudoscience. Don't touch it.
Yeah. And I just kind of kept coming into my realm of my world. Like it kept just coming up in conversation randomly, like things that I wouldn't even be the one to bring it up, but it just kept popping up around me. It's kind of like synchronistic series of events. It was like nudging me, the universe nudging me. And then finally I was like, okay, well, and then it was actually one of my majors was anthropology for a while, cultural anthropology. And we were doing like a class project on healthcare throughout human history. And I mean, Chinese medicine is the longest standing form of healthcare that we have in our written history. So that came up quite a lot. And it was one of those things where I was like, whoa, I didn't realize people actually this is a whole field of study, a whole field of medicine all on its own. And it was just like a gradual increase in just intrigue and wonder and looking into it more and more and more. And then finding out that there's a school and going to the school at an open house and learning about it. And then I read a book about it. And then I, every step of the way, I just fell more and more in love.
Did you have any hesitation going into it? Were you worried that maybe it was a pseudoscience, or you were full sail?
I was pretty full sail. I mean, what is pseudoscience, right? It's like, and even when you look at the broad scheme of things, science itself has only existed for, you know, as far as what we know it, 50 to 100 years max. Like, it's just one view of looking at the world, and it's not everything is set in stone. It only looks at what is perceivable with our eyes, with our ears, with our nose, with what can be replicated. And that is limiting because it doesn't allow for the full scope of things to be more than just what we can see. Like, there's so much more. I mean, we only see like less than 10% of the light spectrum. So what else is there that we're not seeing, you know? That's my thought. So I was very open-minded, I would say, as far as seeking something different and then, being challenged in that way. And I think that's something that I have to do a lot is educate people to be open-minded, to see things differently, to not be so black and white. There's gray and there's everything in between. So,
well, I would imagine you would have to be pretty open-minded to go down this path, even initially.
Yes.
Because it seems like now, and correct me if I'm wrong, there's a lot of science out there, especially around acupuncture. And it seems like there's one of three camps. It's either it's fake and you could get the same results from placebo, or there are some benefits slightly better than placebo, but not really. Mm-hmm. Or they're the people that are like, yeah, it helps for certain things and it makes a difference. And there's studies to back that side up. I mean, it's very divided. There's not like a 100% yes, it works, or 100% no, it doesn't, and we need to move on to something else.
Yeah, that's very true. And I think that's probably large. I mean, for me, it's not something to like be believed in or not believed in, because if you have any idea of how long it's been around,
thousands of years.
Yeah, I mean, just in written history, 2,500 years. But beyond that, I mean, you can get into the pretty barbaric eras where we didn't have any writing and things were written with bones on turtle shells, and that goes back over 5,000 years. Like, this has been a conversation. TCM has been a conversation for over 5,000 years, and it is a result of all of that time of clinical empirical evidence through working with people. So, I mean, to me, that speaks for itself. It's survived countless wars. It's survived, countless eras of like book burning and, things like that have happened throughout China, throughout history. And then it spread, to Western world. I mean, only in like the 70s, it only became legal in the United States in like the late 70s. So, I mean, I would think that if we really think that like Western medicine is the only route as far as like medical care, then that would be very egotistical, thinking that we only know best because this is all we know. This is all we're taught in our short lifespan. So, I've always had a much more broad view of the world and history and mental thinking and development and all that stuff. And I mean, TCM has been there through all of it. So
break down acupuncture specifically for me. What, in your interpretation, when you're doing it, what is the process? What are you hoping to achieve through it? Because I know that through the TCM perspective, it's you're balancing chakra, or you're trying to...
Not chakra. Chakra is more of like a Hindu concept. Yeah, it's chi is one of the many things that we're balancing. And, when people ask me this question, I can answer in a lot of different ways. I can cater to more of the scientific mind and speak about how it helps to regulate hormone production, how it stimulates like neurotransmitters in the brain, specifically enkephalins, which are known to help block pain signals. I can talk about how it increases blood circulation through the tissues, all the tissues in the bodies and the organs. But I mean, at the very fundamental level, what I do is I utilize the body's resources to enact a specific healing response, and I focus that healing response in the area that like me and the patient are working on. So that's one way of explaining it. Or I can talk about, qi and blood and jing or essence and yin and yang and all of these like very in-depth Chinese medical theories that most people would be like, well, what is that? So, yeah, basically utilizing the body's internal resources, boosting the ones that are deficient, decreasing the ones that are too in excess or relatively in excess, and using that to have a specific healing response happen in the body.
Do you align your interpretation of that more with the TCM method, or do you apply some of the Western ideals of, we're trying to activate the nervous system and we're trying to activate the immune response to target whatever problems are going on?
I more utilize language that people are familiar with to explain it, but when it comes down to treatment principles, treatment protocols, what I'm doing, it's based all in traditional Chinese medical theory, because otherwise it wouldn't work if it didn't. I can't apply Western medicine to traditional Chinese medicine and have the same outcomes. It's designed in its own system. It is its own system. It's standalone. It works on its own without the existence of Western medicine. I just use that language to explain to people what I'm doing and how it works.
Because that's the approach that they're used to here.
That's
So
what
you're
they
catering to your
understand.
audience.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. And I've had a lot of time in, reading medical theory, Chinese medical theory. So I have much more of an understanding of exactly what's happening and how it works and why it's happening using Chinese medical language, which is qi and blood, which, may or may not be correlated to the same blood that you and I know, but similar. Even the organs themselves, like the liver in Chinese medicine, is not necessarily the physical organ of the liver that Western medicine uses. So, I kind of gauge where people are at and like how open-minded they are and how I need to navigate that in order to explain to them in a way that is receivable. And I mean, that's probably one of the hardest things about being a Chinese medical practitioner is like we learn this completely different way of thinking, and then we have to integrate it into the Western world and bring it to people with Western thinking and Western minds and hope they understand or figure out a way to help them understand.
So taking the TCM approach to your explanation, break that down for me. Are you trying to use these needles to block the qi, or?
Typically, no, it's more about increasing qi flow. Like there's this old saying, like where there's pain, there is blockage, whether it's a blockage of qi or a blockage of blood. So usually it's about increasing qi flow through certain areas. Yeah, that's kind of what I would say.
And there are hundreds of qi points?
In just traditional Chinese medicine, there are close to 400 that we learn in school. And then that's just the bare minimum of what we learn. And then there have been people throughout history who have come up with their own set of points that they've also practiced for, thousands of years and then, passed on to disciples and people who, and if it's effective and it gets results, then usually they stick around. So there's several different styles. I mean, more than several. There's tons of different styles. And I think, that's something that you kind of navigate after you get out of school and learn the bare basics of everything, is you get to kind of delve into what intrigues you most and which styles work for you most. But I think, what's most important is that you at least have those fundamentals down, because without that, you can't expand upon it.
Yeah, you need that foundation.
For sure. Yeah.
And so with the qi points, they could be connected to anywhere not relative to the exact location they are on the body, right? So you could use a qi point, say in the ear, and it could be connected to something completely different, like knee pain or something.
Well, yeah. Yep. We use, we call them acupuncture points, and we utilize the points that run on channels. Each of the major organs have its own channel, and then there are a handful of other channels that, things like the governing vessel, the conception vessel, things that are not necessarily specific organ related. And those channels, some of them traverse the entire body. Some of them only run from the chest to the tip of the fingers. Some of them only run from the tip of the toes into the chest. So they all kind of have their place, and they all have their functioning based on the organ system or the channel itself, what it's best for. And you navigate by picking and choosing what what you want to do in the body and picking the points that do those things. But yes, there's also auricular acupuncture, which is points in the ear. That's actually it's like traditional Chinese medicine, but it's a separate system of the 12-channel theory that we use body acupuncture. It's I use it more of it as enhancement to my treatments, but there are practitioners that only use ear acupuncture because it's super convenient and it's just only in the ear. But yeah, so
that's like an add-on on top of traditional acupuncture.
It is, yeah.
And what typically are you treating? So when somebody comes to you with, is it normally just pain? I know I've heard IBS. I've also heard color blindness. How much is that?
Lots of stuff. I mean, anything, any symptom that ails you, you can come to, and oftentimes people come to me with like a disease where it's like, I have this or I have that, a specific disease, but what Chinese medicine doesn't acknowledge Western medical diagnosis is it's its own diagnostic system. So I take, okay, well, of that, what point or what symptoms are bothering you? And usually I get, a list of symptoms that Western medicine is most closely associated to that disease and go from there. And I treat the symptoms, and I treat those symptoms based on how they reflect in the person's constitution and what I see in excess, what I see in deficiency, and go from there. So I treat a lot of different things. But pain is definitely the number one thing I think that acupuncture has gotten the most attention for and has been most studied as far as scientific research in clinical studies. So that's definitely where I think the majority of the people I work with is like low back pain, neck pain, hip pain, knee pain, shoulder pain.
Is that where it's most effective? Utilizing acupuncture?
I wouldn't say it's most effective necessarily, but I mean, it's effective at treating a lot of different things. So I also treat insomnia, depression, anxiety, any type of digestion ailment, whether it's like constant bloating, constipation, diarrhea, vomiting, upper respiratory infections. It treats everything because it's its own standard. It's its own type of medicine. So,
but it's not guaranteed to treat, right?
No. I mean, you couldn't, no. There are things that it's not. Yeah, I can't say that I can guarantee you treatment, but what I say is we'll work on it together and see what happens. And usually within a handful of treatments, we'll be able to tell, like, is this working or is it not? And if it's not, then usually I shift things a little bit. If it is, then we stay the course.
What does the treatment plan look like? You do 5 and then reassess if it's working for them or not and then continue on?
It's different for every person. I mean, someone who's had like chronic back pain for 10 years, like it's going to take a lot more treatments because it's taken that long for them to get help from me and utilize the way that I do things. So someone who's been in pain for 10 years is going to have a lot longer of a treatment protocol than someone who's had back pain for 6 months or who just tweaked their back the other day. So it varies greatly, and each person gets their own specific treatment protocol, their and follow-ups, and yeah. Usually I say, like for chronic things, I'll tell people you want to give it a solid 8 to 10 treatments. For more acute things that just recently came up or just recently started happening, it's usually between 3 to 5 treatments that we start seeing results. But once those results begin, what happens is they tend to compound on themselves. So sometimes what can happen is people will see really great results for a handful of days, and then it might start to go back in the other direction. And that's usually what we do is like, okay, at that point we're working together weekly, once a week for 5 to 6 weeks, and then we go from there. We see how those results hold, and if they hold longer than the week, then I say, okay, let's go to 2 weeks, every 2 weeks, and see what happens then. And then as soon as those results are holding for 2 weeks, we go to 3 weeks. And then eventually to where we're on just a maintenance schedule where it's like, just every maybe 6 weeks to 2 months, come in and get a tune-up, maintenance, check in, see how things are going, just tackle any smaller issues that people might have. So, yeah.
Is the maintenance routine, is that guaranteed for most treatments, even if they are successful? Is you're always going to need kind of a tune-up after every few months or so?
You don't need to have any problems to get acupuncture. It is an amazing stress management tool. It's super duper relaxing. So in that way in itself, it's great for our modern go culture. It's like kind of Some people tell me that it's the only time they have just to stop and have an hour to themselves, like quiet time, and lay and do nothing. So, I mean, at the bare minimum, maintenance is good for everyone, whether you have problems or not. And that's how it excels at preventing things. That's where the preventative aspect comes in, because, you know, you might get like a little thing that comes up, like, oh, all of a sudden I've been getting a lot of headaches. And I'll be like, okay, well, and we work on it. So where are your headaches? And then we get that to go away before it becomes something worse and worse and worse. The body tends to give very small cues before it gives very loud shouting cues. And we have a tendency to ignore those smaller cues until they become a big problem that then interfere with our life.
Well, I think that's the root problem with Western medicine.
Yep.
Is that's how we're primed.
Yep.
You're primed to go until you hit the brick wall,
Yep.
and then you go and you get patched up.
Yep.
You're not trained to, oh, maybe I'm tripping before I hit this brick wall.
Exactly.
So let me figure out why I'm tripping.
Yeah.
And then you can stop it before it happens.
Yep.
We don't have that preventative case.
It's very true. And I think culturally, we are always in this go, go, go state, very externally oriented. We don't take a lot of time to stop and just sit and be and ground in our bodies and assess what's happening. Like if you got more in tune, if people were taught from an early age to be more in tune with their body, they would recognize things long before like something massive had to happen in order for the body to get your attention. Like, hey, I need something to change. This lifestyle is running me into the ground. And if you don't change something now, eventually you might not be able to move at all. So yeah, I think it's a very culturally taught thing to just be constantly on the go and no breaks.
And to patch over whatever problems you have. I know a ton of people who are, popping Advil or ibuprofen daily, weekly for months because they've got some systemic problem.
Yep.
It's like, don't you want to figure out why you have to take 4 Advil every morning? Like, what? Should we try to figure out why that's happening?
Yeah.
No, I'll just take the Advil.
No, I know a lot of people like that too, unfortunately. And I think it's a lot easier to remain blind to the problem and just take a pill that takes your problems away, as opposed to setting yourself up with a lifestyle shift that is going to sustain you into old age. We don't really age very gracefully like anymore. We kind of hit a point and then things just start to decline really fast. And it's just, yeah.
What do you think that stems from?
Well,
just that go mentality.
That's part of it. An accumulation of diet choices that have become very normalized in our culture. Alcohol consumption that's very normalized in our culture. These things that are patching up problems and not being solution oriented, but just covering it up enough to get through the next day or the next week or however long. It's just not a lot of root-based thinking. It's more systematic, like just patch it up and keep pushing. I want to keep living my life the way I've always been doing it. I don't want to have to change anything. Like, change, oh my God. It's like habits are one of like the biggest things when it comes to the human mind. Like our minds rely on predictability and feel safe. Our nervous systems feel most safe when we can sit in our normal hardwiring and just run that on repeat. It's easiest, of course. So anything that challenges that is going to feel a little out of whack at first.
Why do you think there's the discrepancy between traditional Chinese medicine and Western medicine? Is it just because we have the technology that we have kind of forgotten the basis of where we've come from in some regards and that preventative measure? Because now we do have medication. Now we do have the ability to do transplants and, miracles of science.
Yeah, I mean, there are definitely aspects of Western medicine that are miracles and definitely needed for these worst case scenario events. However, where I think that discrepancy comes from is it comes from a very, very long time ago when like Rockefeller medicine was introduced and they realized that they couldn't put a patent on something that grows out of the earth, which is what herbal medicine is. And they shifted to petroleum-based medications because it was made in a lab. They could slap a name brand on it and sell it like crazy. So
And meanwhile, they have isolated a lot of those plant compounds and gotten their patents.
It's true. It's true. Yeah. And then you mix it with a lot of other things and it becomes, it becomes more concentrated, which sometimes is better and sometimes is not better. But yeah, I think that when that big shift happened, that Western mentality really blocked out a lot of the previous ways of doing things, the herbal medicine, the using plants to heal and change and, help ourselves. And they made it out to be very pseudoscience-y. It was very intentionally done. They stopped people from learning it in their medical schools, and it's kind of been a very long process of grooming. And I think that is where it really stems from, is like just a long time of people thinking a certain way because that's what their doctors were taught and that's what their doctors tell them, and that's what people typically blindly follow without question. Is, well, my doctor told me this, but your doctor was, went to school 17 years ago, also when, all of the modern science nowadays is not even applied to their schooling. So things have changed even in the time that they were in school, but they were trained in a very specific way to help you with a very specific thing, which is, what pharmaceutical do I need to treat this? So they're doing what they're taught and they're only spouting what they're taught. So, and that's not diet. I mean,
diet is completely missing from that education.
Exactly. Yeah, it's completely absent. So they really get zero nutrition information unless they actively are seeking that out for themselves. And a lot of doctors too, they don't always stay up to date on the modern research, and it takes like 15 to 20 years for proven clinical research to even hit medical schools. So every doctor that even graduates is still always operating like about 15 to 20 years behind the current research. So where does the discrepancy come from was your question. I think I answered it.
Yeah. Well, it's just, if you had to pick one root problem that is systemic, it almost feels like it's diet and just the lack of understanding around diet. People go through life eating pizza or eating burgers every day, and then it's like, why do I feel like crap all the time?
Yeah.
Or eating these processed carbs.
The processed foods.
How many people are constantly eating that? Yeah.
Right? Just, quick and easy out of a box, everything's in there. But another part is it's just the norm. And that's what's in our grocery stores, and there's not a lot of question around like what the ingredients are. And then you look at this long list of ingredients that you can't even recognize or pronounce, and you're just okay with putting that in your body. It's like, what?
And it's got all these dyes and all these additives.
Yeah, yeah.
Like, does that need to be in there?
Right.
What?
You look at other countries that have banned a lot of the ingredients that people are consuming for almost every single meal. And you have to ask why. Like, why are our government agencies not doing more to protect us in the way of health? The reason is because it benefits them, because it creates more patients. More patients equals more money. Big pharma, it fuels back into everything. And yeah, so it's unfortunate, but I think more and more people are realizing that they have more power than they think that they do, and it all comes from what you do on a day-to-day basis in your daily habits. And that's something I say all the time. It's not what you do some of the time, it's what you do most of the time. So eating, whatever, a piece of pizza here and there is not bad for you. It's just keep it in moderation. Make sure that you get back on track with something else. And I think that's another big thing in our culture, is like these diet fads where it's like, oh, I'm going to do this juice fast for a month and not eat food for a month. And it's just like, well, you're essentially putting yourself in a starvation mode, first of all, which is, again, not very good. It might work for some people. It might help you lose weight, but it might also make you gain weight because your body is scared that now it doesn't know where it's getting its next meal. So what is it going to do? It's going to pack on fat to protect you. So there's, I think the fad diets are also kind of a problem, because people think, well, if I can do this one thing for 4 weeks and, and then I can go back to the way I've always been. I think people just like to stay in their comfort zones. And once you realize how much better you feel like actively making a lifestyle shift on a day-to-day basis, that's when you get to see the real results.
Well, I think it's hard because those results are delayed.
It's
You're not
exactly.
going to not eat pizza for one day and then feel great the next day. It's, I mean, sometimes it could take weeks, it can take months. It's like working out. You're not going to see results after the first time you go to the gym. You have to just trust the process and try to carry through. And then when you see the results, it can give you the boost, but you have to hit that point of, I can see the progress being made.
Yeah.
And that's I think the challenge for a lot of people.
Yeah. Delayed gratification.
Exactly.
Another thing that's ingrained in our culture is instant gratification. What does a pill give you? Instant gratification, because it's
right now.
Concentrated compound that's just going to have its action very quickly. So yeah, delayed gratification and commitment. I mean, commitment can be a hard thing for people. Discipline, it's another huge thing. It goes against a lot of what, like I said, our safety nets of our nervous system is predictability. So sometimes you have to change what is predictable, and sometimes it doesn't feel good at first. And then once you get into the habit of it and your body settles, like, oh, okay, this is okay, I am safe. It's like, it just becomes part of your way of life.
It's just that daily routine, making it a daily routine.
Yeah.
And then
just
having faith that it's going to work out.
Yeah. Well, and not beating yourself up when you fall off the path. Just know that I'm going to enjoy the heck out of this meal or, this vacation. And then I'm going to get back to my normal life, which is, healthier, ideally.
That's my problem, is I can get very hyper focused on what I'm doing. Or so say it's, eating clean. I'll eat clean and then be tempted with the pizza. And it's like, I can't. And then when I finally do, I'm eating the whole pizza.
Yeah.
And then so I might do that, a couple times a month, but it's not the moderation aspect of, okay, I'll have, a slice a week. It's no, I'm going to wait 2 weeks and then I have a whole pizza and then I'm going to keep going.
Right. And sometimes it's better just to give in to that craving and know that it's okay just to have a 1 or 2 slices for dinner and then get back on track versus the no, I can't. I feel like there's also this, when we're told no, even from a young age, it's like we want it even more. Like, well, you told me I can't.
So now I got to have it.
Yeah, exactly. So
do you work on, because it's Lima's acupuncture and herbal center. So what is tied into the herbal center aspect?
Herbs. Simply put.
Kind of a giveaway.
Yeah. Well, there's 5 major branches of traditional Chinese medicine, herbology being one of them, acupuncture being one of them, myofascial release, massage, cupping being another one of them, as well as diet and lifestyle. That's another big pillar. And lastly is energetic medicine. So there's a lot of different facets that you can go into and specialize in just under the field of traditional Chinese medicine. It doesn't have to be acupuncture, but herbal medicine is another very commonly used one route that acupuncturists tend to combine with herbal medicine because together they are so effective. It kind of helps to kind of instill the blueprint that we work on in the office together with acupuncture. It keeps that going while we're not together, for that week or 2 weeks or whatever span of time. So typically, like my herbal formulas, at least what I use, people use different things, but I use pills because that's what people are most used to. I mean, it's typically easier for people just to take some pills than it is for someone to do a decoction, which is like boiling the raw herbs and creating a tea and then drinking that tea that probably is going to taste really gross, like 3 times a day, or a granule, which is an already, essentially decocted version of the herbs that then is made into a powder, what we call granules, and then you mix that with hot water to, again, make a tea that you have to taste. But usually people don't want to taste like very earthy, bitter, sometimes, tons of different flavors that you wouldn't even think or be exposed to comes in herbal medicine. But usually people don't want to taste that. They just want like simplicity. And that simplicity tends to come with pills because that's what people are used to. So.
And you guys are making all of that in-house?
I don't make them. I buy from a company. Like people grow the herbs and people use those herbs raw. Or you can, dry them out, blend them down. You could take a lot of time doing all that if you want to. I don't do that. I just leave that to, a well-trusted company that.
Yeah, kind of outsource that
exactly.
part of the work.
So I just order the pills online and then, use my knowledge to assess what formula is best for what person. And usually they're like a blend of, they're all plant parts or naturally occurring elements. So it could be, flowers, it could be leaves, it could be stem, it could be bark, it could be root, it could be even minerals. So there's a lot of unique and wide variation of things in herbal medicine, but that kind of gives you a little bit of an idea.
And you said one of those 5 parts of TCM is myofascial release. What is that?
Myofascial release. So myo is muscle, fascial is fascia, which is essentially the connective tissue that encompasses every organ, every muscle system of our body. It's this network of connective tissue that is kind of like this net and keeps everything in place. So it's essentially working on the muscles and the fascia in order to usually relieve pain, but there are a lot of different medical functions, like even from upper respiratory infections. You can do work on the back behind the lungs and really help to open up the lungs by working on the muscles and the fascia that operate behind the lungs. So, yeah.
And that are each of those 5 pillars, you are utilizing all of those in your practice at Lima's?
I do utilize. Yeah, I utilize all of them actually. Yep.
Do you find that you have a pretty equal distribution of clients amongst those? Or no,
definitely not. Nope. Acupuncture is definitely number 1. Cupping is a close second.
Cupping is another one of those things that kind of falls into that woo-woo category, right?
It could. I mean, it depends on who you ask, I guess. But if you've ever had cupping, you feel instant results. I mean, it's that instant gratification. That's probably the only thing in Chinese medicine that gives you instant gratification is right after it's done. After you feel those cups pop off, you're like, wow, I feel so relaxed. So, I don't know. It depends on who you ask, I guess.
What is the process with that? Or what is the idea behind it?
So essentially, it's like, think of massage where you're pressing into the body, but this is almost the opposite, where you're pulling the skin away. You're creating more space between the tendons, the ligaments, the fascia, and where it connects to the muscle. You create more space to increase blood flow. So, and lymph flow. I mean, the fluid of lymph throughout our body. Those two systems work very closely. So essentially, like the main treatment protocol for that is to increase blood or move blood. So when you see those like perfectly circular bruises on people, or they're not actually bruises, but they're very similar looking, what it is stagnant blood that gets trapped in the muscles, and you're drawing it out of the muscle and into more of that lymph layer between the skin, where the body is able just to clear it a lot easier. When it gets trapped in the muscles, it's a lot harder for it to clear, because the only way for it to clear is for blood to move through more quickly to push it through, which can happen with exercise and stuff like that. But anyway, you're drawing the blood out, and that increases blood flow. It brings fresh new blood, which, I mean, you need that flow of fresh new blood, because that's what brings all of the recovery components, the healing components to those muscles. It brings the nutrients for the muscles to operate properly, the hydration to those muscles. So that's kind of what it does out in a nutshell.
That makes sense. I've heard a lot of like UFC fighters doing that to increase circulation and stuff.
Yeah, Olympic athletes. I mean, I think like Michael Phelps was probably one of the biggest first ones where people saw them on his back and they were like, "What is that?" And it kind of just has gotten a lot more attention since then. So great for muscle recovery, which is typically why athletes use it, as well as aches and pains that come with being a professional athlete. So
is that the typical demographic? Is people who are working out pretty rigorously?
I wouldn't say people working out. I'd say pain and tension are the two biggest things that people get cupping for. Yeah.
Pain and tension.
Tension as well. Yeah. So even people who don't work out, but who sit at a desk all day long and have like their shoulders always hiked up, and it's great for that too. So yeah, it helps it can recorrect that posture of like constantly being hunched over.
Yeah, that's me. Sitting here working at the computer or editing a podcast, just hunched over, and then I'm like, oh crap, I gotta.
Yeah, but those people who work out a lot, same thing, because oftentimes people don't stretch enough when they work out, and so that ends up leading to the muscles being in this constant state of contraction versus the elongation, which is what the stretching does. So it helps to encourage that in the muscle. It elongates the muscle and encourages them to let go and relax.
Yeah, I fall into that category too.
Yeah.
I keep meaning to get into yoga because I feel like that complements exercise really well, especially like
Yes.
strength training.
Yep. Anyone who works out a lot, I'm always like asking about how much they stretch because people just will totally not even do it at all. And I'm like, okay, well, not only is it a great prevention for injury, it's it'll help you build more muscle. Like I don't think people realize that it is the opposite thing that gives more to your body in order to build it further, while protecting it and while increasing blood flow through the muscles. All these things that you want, you know. But
And it helps with mobility, which is huge.
does,
I mean,
it
especially if
does.
you want to work out effectively and utilize
Yeah.
your full range of motion, you
Right.
got to be able to move.
Yeah, and be able to squat down past the age of 60 or 70 and keep doing these things that you can do as a young person but can't do as an old person like that. It comes from just that deep stretching, and I think, it's another one of those things that forces people to stop and slow down and be in their bodies for the first time in a week and a half, and then it feels unsafe because it's like, I don't know, it's boring or whatever. People don't like to be bored.
It's weird how little we actually take care of our bodies when you're in this thing for hopefully 80 years. I mean, 80 years on a good day, right?
Yeah.
You've got this vessel, and people will take better care of their cars than what they're stuck with.
Yep, they do, and it's I think it's largely because people aren't educated to do that by design, unfortunately.
I think that's one of the good things coming out of COVID is I think more people are aware of how important health is.
Yeah. Yep.
I'm also worried about the counterbalance of now maybe more people are skeptical of modern medicine in a way that might come back to bite us in the ass.
Yeah. Well, I think skepticism, no matter what it is a good thing because it means you're asking questions, and I think questions are good because questions, if they have good answers, then I don't know. I think questioning has become more and more common with the whole COVID thing. Like people are now just asking more questions about everything, and to me, that's good.
Do you think that you were already kind of in that camp going into TCM prior to all of this craziness, that you were kind of already on this
Probably
path of, okay, there might be some
questioning.
other,
Yes,
and there might be other answers than what I'm being told.
Definitely. Yep. Well, and when the people in charge have a vested interest in staying in charge and continuing the narrative, why would they want anything to change?
Has the field of TCM and, I mean, more so acupuncture, I would imagine, changed since you first got involved? I mean, obviously, like we said, people are awakening to it a little bit because of post-COVID, but has it, in terms of its broader acceptance by traditional Western medicine, say, has it gotten better, or is it still kind of in this camp?
I think it's improving. I think it's definitely improving. I'd say when I first got into school, it was still very much like kind of, and still there are doctors that still do, but just write it off as like, oh, that doesn't work, when they know like literally nothing about it, and I've never even read a clinical study about it, but that doesn't work. You can try it, but that doesn't work. I hear like people tell me all the time that they tell their doctors, oh, I've been going to see an acupuncturist, and that's sometimes their reply. But more and more, I've been hearing the exact opposite, that their primary care providers have been recommending acupuncture, like, oh, go, you can go try and see if this will work for you. And so I think it's definitely shifting. I think since COVID too, people are looking for alternatives, especially alternatives that focus in preventative and focus on educating their clientele about what it is to be healthy, what a healthy diet looks like. Like that is a foreign concept to people. What is a healthy diet? Like what is healthy exercise, and for who? Like every person is different. A menstruating woman is going to have much different like exercise guidelines than a man in his late 20s. It's just it's can be catered to the person and to their lifestyle, and so I think, yeah. I lost my train of thought there.
It's the acceptance and the shift in that. You kind of said something that struck a chord there, is the idea of different things for different body types and for different people. And one of the things that I haven't fully divested time into looking at, but I have this very basic understanding of, is women who are pregnant and what they can and can't eat.
Yeah.
And it's, I feel like it's kind of a rabbit hole that I could go down, because if they can't eat it because they're pregnant, should just everybody try to avoid these foods? Like, is there a reason,
Yeah.
especially when it gets into like certain sea animals that you're eating that have
Yeah.
mercury, like some of these fish species that are just jam-packed with these heavy metals? Would that just be good to avoid across the board? Like, if we can't eat it because, or a pregnant woman can't eat it because it'll affect the baby, maybe it has some effect on you as well. This is just if I'm going down this route. Yeah.
On normal, like non-pregnant women, it would, in theory, have an effect on them as well. It is a massive rabbit hole because a lot of it's very contradictory. It's like, oh, you can't eat cold lunch meat, but I could get, a foodborne illness from like strawberries. What is there was an HIV outbreak in strawberries recently, or like from E. coli from lettuce. I could get it from anything. Why deli meat? So there's a lot of contradictory in it, and there's so many rules. I feel like it's too guilt-ridden for people too, of like, oh, I have to adhere to these guidelines or else this bad thing's going to happen to my baby. But, the baby comes out at 2 months old and doctors have no qualms like giving it 4 different types of vaccines, which have aluminum and mercury in them and an abundance of other strange ingredients that you're like, well, but, 2 months ago when it was inside me, this was bad for it, but now it's okay when it still has developing organs, so there's a lot of qualms that don't exactly add up in the way that it should make sense. So
yeah, the deli meat thing is weird. I didn't know that one.
Yeah, deli meat, cold deli meat. That's one of them.
Is it because of additives or how it's processed?
Honestly, I don't even know. I should know. This is my second pregnancy, and I should know. But yeah, obviously that's not a rule that I follow very strictly. But that's okay.
What do you? So are you pregnant right now?
I am. Yeah,
okay,
I'm 6 months pregnant. Yeah.
Oh wow.
Yeah. It's nice of you to not assume, but I'm like, you can tell if you look.
What do you make of the whole vaccine thing? Because I feel like that is up in the air right now, or there's a lot of discussion around it.
Yes. I am very questioning of it because you look at my parents, for example, people in, their 50s and 60s. When they were kids, they got maybe 8 vaccines total from the time they were born to the time they turned 18, and then most people stop, whereas if you look at children nowadays, they get, I think it's like 25 by the time they're 6 months old. By the time they're 18, it's somewhere between 80 and 90 different doses, and vaccines themselves, and then the doses often, there's like 4 different doses in one shot sometimes. So I'm very questioning because what we know as people being quote unquote vaccinated, a majority of the adult population does not follow that category, but we're so strict when it comes to children following that category. And, I think the whole COVID thing it was a very huge thing of like, so you have to get your boosters, and as soon as your booster wears off, you're no longer safe. But if you look at things like measles and rubella and all these other diseases that, most adults don't get their MMR vaccine every couple of years once it fades, once it wanes. I mean, every vaccine has a waning period. It doesn't mean lifelong immunity. So I'm questioning, I guess, is my response to that. I don't adhere to any camp per se, because I feel like people really like to label, oh, you're an anti-vaxxer or whatever. It's just
that anti-vax branding is so strong.
Yeah, it is.
Once that label comes out, it shuts down all discourse.
Yep, and it, again, intentionally done. You can categorize people into a camp and then discredit anything they say because it has such a negative connotation to be an anti-vaxxer. But again, I ask questions, and I like to know exactly what I'm putting into my body, no matter what it is, whether it's injected or going into my mouth. That's the kind of person I am, or going onto my skin, all the way through like the personal care product industry, body wash, shampoo, like all these things. I'm conscious of what chemicals I'm exposed to, and I'm conscious about my choices of what I expose myself to and how much and when. So
COVID has made me more questioning in that regard. Prior to COVID, I've got all my vaccines for everything, and then COVID came around, and their willingness to push a product that really made no difference. That
Mhm.
really was not necessary. And
Yeah.
I mean, there's evidence coming out now that was more detrimental than anything.
Yeah.
And people's desire, first off, not to accept the information as it did change into that negative perspective.
Yep.
And just ability to toe the line of a company. There's like a wasp right here. I've
I
been
see
watching.
that.
Their willingness to toe the line for a company who really has no incentive to make a great product. They're
Yeah.
just trying to make money, and they made a shit
made
ton
more,
of
yeah.
money.
More than just about any industry across the board. Yeah. So I feel like that's always a huge thing you want to look at is who's profiting off of this, because that's always where the biggest incentive lies for these mega corporations, is how to keep making more money.
And we know that they have done shady things.
Yes.
That's the crazy part.
Oh yeah.
Billion-dollar payouts because they pushed a product that they knew was going to have severe consequences, and in some cases knew it was going to kill people.
Yep.
And then on the flip side, knew we're going to still probably do pretty good. Yeah, because we're going to make some money.
They're liability free. You can't actually sue them for it. You can, call the VAERS, vaccine adverse event, whatever, that database that they keep track of, and you can tell them. But I mean, it takes quite a lot before people actually decide to, we should probably pull this from the market, And by then, it's like a massive amount of damage has already been done to people, because I think it's like only 11% of the VAERS cases are reported. So you have to figure there's probably 80 to 90% of people out there who just have these things now that they think they just have to live with, and they just came about as but it's like, no, actually it came as a result of, a pharmaceutical product that was produced and pushed on you, and you obliged, and you thought you were doing your duty. You thought you were keeping your grandma safe. But yeah.
And meanwhile, they control all the data from the trials, and their ability to manipulate it and still be within the law is so insane.
Yeah.
I mean, separate how people feel from vaccines from the issue of them running trials.
Yeah.
It is insane.
It is.
Where's the incentive to just not lie about it all?
Right.
Because you're still within the law. You can manipulate the data and use the data that you want.
Or just use language that makes it seem like it's in a certain light, because a lot of people won't take the time to actually read the clinical trials that they do on people, and they can, put this title on that, suggests this and this and this, and then you read and you're like, that actually doesn't suggest that at all. There wasn't enough people even in this study to use this as a valid study, or their techniques were questionable, or their funding was questionable, because usually it's someone who has a vested interest in a specific outcome. So they're gonna make sure that they get that outcome, because they're getting paid by the person who needs it to be that outcome. So there's a lot of that's a big thing, I think, in clinical research. There's a lot of ethical questions that comes up.
To say the least.
Yeah. That's putting it nicely.
Yeah, right? I'm not sure if you're familiar with Robert Kennedy Jr.
I am, yeah.
Okay, I've been listening to some of his speeches, and he has obviously been labeled as one of those anti-vax guys. And I was listening to him talk about autism rates in older generations versus my generation and younger.
Yeah.
And it's insane. And the fact that there are no, I think it's placebo-controlled studies on vaccines just across the board.
Right. They've never compared a fully unvaccinated child to a fully vaccinated child, or compared one vaccine versus the entire vaccination schedule. They've never done a full study on the entire schedule together. You don't know how all of those interactions happen, especially when a baby is getting injected so much. They don't even have the vocabulary to be able to tell you what's wrong, what they feel, what happens. And then, 5-6 years down the line, they have a chronic disease, and you just think that you don't know you can't trace it back to anything. So yeah, I'm familiar with Robert Downey Jr. Yeah, he's Robert Downey Jr. Robert Kennedy. Yeah, I'm familiar with that guy too, but yeah, Robert Kennedy. Yeah.
It's absurd, because if you would have asked me in 2019, there were always those people that say, oh, vaccines cause autism. I would have just wrote them off as, there's some crazy quack who is out here spewing all this anti-vax stuff.
Yeah.
Cut to today, and it's like, do we really know? I'm not even saying that they do or they don't, but do we really know? Do we have the
I don't know
information
that we
available
really
to
know.
say?
Yeah, I mean, all you can do is do studies that support your claim, right? And you can have, I mean, there's a saying, there's enough evidence to support any claim in the world. You can do a study that supports any outrageous claim. So that's sometimes where like the clinical studies are not super reliable because it's just not. Like it can be spun in any way that it's designed to be spun. And people take such weight in these one things, but it's like this is just one way of showing that something is a certain way. But it's like causation is not necessarily correlation. It's or correlation is not necessarily causation. You can't necessarily say for certain. It's just that we have to look at the span over time, and there has to be a reason why it's increasing. And there has to be a reason why, like in the Amish population, for example, where they get no vaccines, they have 0 cases of autism. Like
I heard that and I
literally
wasn't
0.
sure if that was true.
Yeah.
I heard that a couple
Yeah.
days ago and I was
Yeah.
like, I need to,
yeah.
I'm locking this away. I need to look into
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. I mean, and if they do, it's like, I mean, that's the study I saw too, is that there was literally 0. They couldn't find anyone. So you have to ask yourself, you know, I mean.
Which that's insane.
Yeah.
That's insane.
Yeah, it is. Oh, it's a strange world we live in, honestly.
Well, it's worrying that even having this conversation is almost a no-no.
Yeah.
Just asking the question is
Yep.
problematic.
It is. It totally is. And to ask your doctor that, I mean, most doctors would instantly shut you down or just try to steer you away from answering the question because they too have a vested interest in keeping their patients vaccinated. They get paid for how many vaccines they inject in people. So as soon as, like, you know, in pediatrics, for example, as soon as a baby is not up to date on the vaccines, they get paid less. So, I mean, they have a vested interest in maintaining the narrative.
It's almost amazing that more people aren't conspiracy theorists when you take
Yeah.
everything into perspective.
Yeah.
And all of the conspiracies of the past that have turned out to be true.
Yeah.
It's amazing that more people just don't go to the fringe and say
Yeah.
everything's
Yeah.
it's all a psyop, it's all a lie.
Yep. People don't think as critically as they used to. I think you know, it's hard to ask questions, especially when those questions make you stand out among the crowd or makes you someone different, or just asking the question makes you labeled as an anti-vaxxer or an anti-whatever or a pro this or a pro that. It's I think people are scared of being put into a camp of people that they don't identify with, you know? So that's probably part of it. But, you know, it's all by design. Once again, it's what we're taught from birth in public school. We're not really taught to question things. We're just taught to like memorize and repeat. That's what people do.
When you say it's by design, do you think that there is a nefarious aspect of that, or do you think that that's just how society was structured to get us to this point in some way?
I would say maybe a little bit of both. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, when you go back to like the origins of public school, it was designed for the working factory parent that had to go to work. And so they had to have a place for children to go for 8 hours a day so their workers could stay, so they could keep meeting their bottom lines and this and that, you know. And this is like probably more back into like warring times. Well, as if we're not close to that again, but like World War I or II, you know.
We might be there. 3 might be right around the corner.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, that's where it originated. And it's a lot of it's just in like doctrinating information that it's like, how much of all that information did we actually need? How many people remember their 5th grade history class and could recite it to you nowadays? And what was the point of that? Like, if I don't really genuinely need it, but they didn't take the time to teach me how to do my taxes, which is incredibly important, and I can go to jail if I do it wrong once, like, but they choose not to teach those things, and you have to ask yourself why. They choose not to teach financial literacy. You have to ask yourself why. Like, that's a hugely important aspect of being an adult, and they don't even really talk about it with children very much, aside from counting money itself. So whether there's nefarious intentions or it's by design to create people that will continue believing in the narrative and continue like contributing to this system that we have built, which obviously isn't working out very well for us. I mean, yeah. It's another question I don't have the answer to.
I think part of the challenge of asking questions also stems from the fear of finding out the real answer.
Yeah.
It's like this thread, and if you so say you start with vaccines and you start pulling on the thread, and then
Mhm.
it turns out, oh, well, maybe these vaccines aren't 100% what I
Yeah.
thought they were.
Yeah.
And then you go on to you look at food, and it's like,
Mhm.
oh, maybe there is some stuff in the food that is really bad that probably shouldn't be. You keep pulling on the thread, and it's almost like your psyche starts to unravel because all of
Yeah.
these things start to fall apart. So it's almost better to just say, no, I'm going to toe the line because
Yeah.
Big Daddy's in charge and he knows what he's doing, and
Mhm.
I trust the experts. Well, what does that mean?
Right.
There are experts on both sides. Like who?
Right.
What? We're going to trust the experts we agree with?
Right. And a lot of experts, if they're doing their job right, they disagree. I mean, science was designed to be disagreed with from the beginning. And then somewhere along the lines, we lost track of that like concept of being able to question this person's study and then go about replicating it in a different way. But then, oh, all of a sudden it's not replicable, you know? So I don't know. I think we've definitely lost that aspect of being able to just, yeah, go against the grain a little bit and do things differently. Yeah.
Well, nobody wants to be outcast,
Right.
and
Right.
that can happen if you start saying the wrong things.
Yeah, yeah, and there's a comfortability and kind of a lack of what's the right word? Just self accountability, responsibility when it comes to having to ask a question and then do something differently because of the true answer of it. You know, people would rather be told what to do and just kind of do it rather than have to think critically and think about, well, what's best for me? What's best for me and my family? Like everyone, something's going to be different for every person across the board. So yeah, I mean, there's a comfortability in just being told what to do and then doing it versus asking, well, is that really the right thing to do? Is that really the right way to go about things? And that's where hopefully change can happen down the line. Cause I mean, we definitely are in a place where we need things to change at least a little bit, you know?
Probably a lot.
Yeah.
Probably a lot.
Yeah. Yeah. It's true. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know the idea of change. I don't know how you really work towards it because it feels like every step forward is followed by a step back. And so you're just in this weird lateral plane.
Yeah. And there's always going to be people that don't agree with it because it doesn't work best for them, you know? I mean, but there is no one size fits all for anything across the board. It's like there should be more autonomy and flexibility and freedom in me wanting to live my life my way without being labeled something or whatever, or being seen or being like just instantly not liked or, you know,
Dismissed.
judged because, yeah, exactly. Dismissed or discounted. Like I'm not telling the truth, but it's, you know, the truth can be subjective sometimes.
I think the conspiracy crowd would have more leverage if, like most groups, there weren't the fringe elements. I think that's the biggest problem is you have people who will go on this vax idea of we need more science behind it. Like we need to take a serious look at this. But then they'll also say, oh, you know, the COVID vaccine isn't real. Like there's 5G radiation. Well, I can't even throw 5G radiation in there because I've heard some things that are now. Yeah. Or there's the better one is there's microchips in vaccines. See
right,
that it's like, okay, that's probably too far. We went a little too far off the cliff.
Right.
And then so they use that, people who will counter use that as an example of, see, now we have to dismiss everything they said because
it's a form of gaslighting.
Yeah, they're out here in the field they're crazy. They're a crazy person.
Exactly. I feel like there's people like that in all
every
camps
group.
of people. I mean, you can look at the Republicans, you can look at the Democrats. There's always the fanatics, right? That then kind of ruin it for the people who would like identify as Democrat, but then people are like, oh, you're one of those, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, well, no, I'm not that at all. But, you know, if I have to pick one of two options, which, you know, kind of sucks that I have to pick one out of two, like, I guess I adhere a little bit more to their viewpoint than the other side, or, you know, whatever way you go. Like, there's completely reasonable people on both sides of the spectrum. And then there are those on the very far end of the spectrum that tend to make a little bit more noise and get like the bulk of the attention because of it. Oh.
And it's hard to ignore that.
Yeah, it is. The squeaky wheel gets the grease, right? That's what they say. So
yeah, it is a crazy time. It is just, if we make it through this chaotic period, it'll be interesting to see how we look back on these past few years and
Yeah.
everything that's come out and everything that will probably come out in the future. And
Right.
it's just, it'll be interesting to see how people quarrel with that. If they try to shut it down and just say, no, we didn't know what we were doing, now we do, or actually want to grapple with what happened and progress through it.
Yeah. Yeah. It will be interesting to see how people spin this and how if it's taught in, future history classes for children, like what will they say about like these people? Wow, all these people just blindly got this experimental vaccine that like literally just came out and then they were all told they had to get it, so they got it. Is like, who knows how they're gonna use the verbs and things to describe it.
And who's going to be the good guy and who's the bad guy and
Right.
who we're going to point all the blame at.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. Well, I think we know who's to blame, but
well, Raegan, this was a lot of fun.
Yeah,
I really
it was.
appreciate you coming on and talking.
Yeah.
We'll have to do this again.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it. It's fun.
Do you want to plug where people can find you, where they can find Lima's, all your stuff?
Yeah. I'm on Instagram and Facebook. Instagram, I think, is at acupuncture.by.Raegan, Raegan. And Facebook, I'm on, I think it's Lima or Lima's AHC, or online, www.laahc.com. So yeah, you can find me at any one of those.
Okay. Well, thank you, Raegan. Really, this was great.
Yeah, thank you too.